Hi, my name's Cody Reynolds. I'm running for Congress in Oregon's 6th Congressional District, and I'd like to welcome you to Chat with Cody. Today, our guest is Jodi Anderson. Welcome, Jodi. Jodi has a remarkable story that we'll be sharing and talking about today. And I guess we can go straight into it. So, Jodi, tell us about yourself.
All right. Thank you, Cody, for having me on the show, for sure. Definitely honored. Like I said, my name is Jodi Anderson Jr. I'm a first year's master's student at Stanford's Graduate School of Education, studying education policy and ed tech.
That's remarkable. So where did you do your undergrad?
I also did my undergrad at Stanford as well, political science with a focus in political economy and development, and a minor in Mandarin Chinese.
That's pretty amazing. So what took you from political science to the Graduate School of Education at Stanford?
For sure. Well, studying political science definitely allowed me to understand how systems interact with each other on an international level and a domestic level, and how that impacts people's lives. But I didn't have any real world applicability with that. To be quite honest, it was primarily intellectual and academic. And so my interest in education just stems from my own background and realizing what education had done for me growing up and changing my life in general. And then just wanted to be at the forefront of this massive kind of educational reform movement, especially when it comes to technology and innovation, given the current state that we're in.
I mean, then that lends itself perfectly to my next question: is that what are you doing towards that goal?
No, fair question. So right now, I'm the co-founder of an ed tech platform called Pipe Dreamers that matches at-risk youth, or justice-impacted youth as well, with mentors, rehabilitative programs, counselors, therapeutic services, employment opportunities, and academic resources within their local community.
I mean, I that's remarkable. I know your personal story, but would you care to share it with anybody who might be listening?
Yeah, for sure, Cody. So I was born in 1992 in New York to a 17-year-old mother who was too young and impoverished to kind of take care of me. So she sent me to live with my grandfather in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I spent my formative years out there in an all-Spanish school, not knowing any Spanish at all. So that was quite an interesting experience. My grandfather had served in the Navy, in the Korean War, and was discharged from Mexico. So that's how he ended up out there. So I spent my formative years under his tutelage. He was quite the academic himself, and put me through some rigorous training. Yeah, that's the most euphemistic way I can probably express that. He died quite early from cirrhosis of the liver. So at that time, I went to live with my mother again, and I had 3 additional siblings at that time. So she was around 23 with 4 children, under incredible stress. Ended up losing her mind, so she developed a mental illness, I think schizophrenia. And me and my siblings were in and out of foster care and group homes for the majority of our childhood. And that was in Virginia, in Texas, in New Mexico, in Tennessee. And then eventually we moved back to New York. My mother had another mental breakdown in the Bronx. And we went to foster care in Brooklyn, and my foster brother at the time ran the narcotics trade for the entire neighborhood. And because I could read and write and I was academically gifted, he just employed me to help him out. And that kind of introduced me to the underground economy and just set my life on a different trajectory. Whereas I was definitely a nerd in like honors classes for my childhood, but that put me around a different crowd. And eventually I went to juvie at 15. But when I got there, things actually changed for me as well, probably for the better. Because I think it was the first time I had a stable environment with like food and shelter and books, right? And teachers, in a sense, who actually cared about me. And I ended up getting my GED there at 16, and then enrolling in college at 17, and just taking courses. There wasn't a degree granting program, so I was just doing college for the sake of, intellectual growth and kind of keeping my mind active inside of the juvenile prison. And it wasn't until I was transferred to an adult prison at 19 where I really got the opportunity to pursue college at a pretty high level. So I was transferred to Auburn, which is like the second oldest jail in the United States. And that would seem like a pretty dark place to be. 20 years old, future didn't look too promising, but ironically, Cornell University had a prison education program there where they were bringing a ton of professors from Cornell and graduate students and volunteers to teach collegiate level classes to people who are incarcerated. And it was funded by, I think, Doris Buffett at the time. And it was just an unbelievable opportunity, especially given the environment and some of the challenges that people face inside those incarcerated settings. But I took it super seriously. I felt like I was doing something honorable for my family and my grandfather, because he always wanted me to go to college. It wasn't the ideal college, but it was still a college nonetheless, and I think the opportunity is very real. So I ended up graduating in 2 years. Got my associate's degree. It was like valedictorian, the youngest valedictorian ever, and Cornell ended up launching a campaign for me to get out of prison early. And somehow it worked, and I ended up attending Cornell for 9 months and then transferred to Stanford to pursue the rest of my undergraduate degree. And here I am sitting across from you, Mr. Cody.
Well, like I said, your story is remarkable, and we could probably tell a lot more of it. But I think it's enough background that we can continue the conversation and talk about what you're truly passionate about and that is in helping people like you who have had these unstable and disrupted childhoods escape from the path that they've started walking down. Maybe they've been dragged down it. It seems like with your situation specifically is like you were injected into it. You were placed in a foster care home, and your brother was like, "Hey, come with me,"
Right.
And it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time, I'm sure. And I can definitely understand and appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about prison reform. Like, in a perfect world, what does that even mean?
Well said. I think in a perfect world, prison reform is creating systems and policies and strategies and an environment where prison is a last option, right? It isn't the first kind of order of solutions, right? It's kind of a last resort. And that's, to me, that requires a deeper level of thinking, right? I think we have to get away from the strictly punitive model where if there's some kind of deviant behavior or if there is a problematic situation that someone is, fighting through, the solution shouldn't be to confine them and remove them from society and not really address the root causes of the problems that they're facing.
I mean, I think we can all agree that punitive punishments especially for nonviolent offenders is not the ideal way of handling children who have honestly grown up with difficult and like I said, disruptive circumstances. And so, I agree with you. It's prison reform, I think, starts with opportunity, right? Like giving people who never saw another path forward another path, like showing them. And my personal belief is that one of the best ways for us to do that is through programs like the one you're trying to develop, partnering these at-risk youth with mentors, because mentors, I picked up on the thread from your personal story is that the most impactful person in your life was your grandfather,
right?
But he was taken from you at a pretty young age. So I can only imagine how much big a hole that left in your life, I can only imagine. I recently lost my father, and it left a huge hole in my life. So the point is that I think we all need a mentor. We all need someone who cares, and that we can turn to. So that's how I think that's one of the ways that we can address the opportunities for people prior to them going,
Absolutely.
getting put into these situations, into prison. That's the diversion aspect of prison reform, right? It's like, why incarcerate when we can remediate? And I think that is the first and most important step. Interdict and remediate. At the earliest possible time. But no one ever gave you that opportunity. So now you are at the point in your life where you have had to create your own opportunities almost. So that's the second step, right? So what do you think is the second step for those people who didn't get that interdiction, who didn't have that opportunity, who didn't get that mentorship, or and didn't get diverted away from the school prison industrial complex?
No, well said, Cody. I think even if someone does get engulfed into the system, they definitely have to go through it now that they're in there. Upon release is another touch point, right? So of course there's a phase when you are incarcerated. Like, what does that look like? How do you make that more rehabilitative? How do you bring in programs that actually develop a person's inherent talent, right? In a way that would enable them to be successful in society and on a personal level, right? So that they are not just productive members in society, but actually contributing members to their own community. Supportive.
May I interject?
Go for it. Yeah.
I think so I was in the Army, and the thing that I appreciated most about my service was that regardless of what I was doing that day, I had a mission.
Right.
I had a purpose. Like, everything that I did, had a purpose. At the macro level. The micro level, I did a lot of very, what you might consider menial and asinine tasks. But at the macro level, I was serving, and I think that that is what you're getting at. I mean, I think that is what we need. Is we need people who are coming out of prison with the skills necessary to execute a mission.
No, absolutely. I'll give you a good case study. At Stanford, they had ran this study with the Oakland Unified School District and the San Francisco DA's office, where they would take returning citizens who were juveniles, and then they would match them with a mentor inside of their high school, right? And then they would write a letter to the teacher, like, say Brandon has just returned from juvenile detention. He's looking to, re-enter society. He wants to get back in school. He has these dreams. He has these aspirations. It's like reframing who Brandon is, right? What does he aspire to be, right? And then he's seeking your mentorship or your help, right? And then the instructor would receive this personalized letter from Brandon and make it their personal mission to make sure that Brandon succeeds in life. And that means connecting them with resources, helping them get therapy and counseling. So all of the things that should have happened to Brandon or, say, Jacob or Crystal or Ashley, right, before they went into the system, once they get out, how do you help them transition back into society? How do you empower them to be the best possible version of themselves? How do you help them fulfill their own mission and journey for life? Because they do indeed have those. So I think you're speaking on a very real human element that we all share, despite the trials and tribulations that we go through as individuals. I think collectively we're all in this fight together. The stronger we are, I think, it's better.
So I'll share my thoughts on how we get to that point.
Right.
But I'd like to hear your thoughts before we do that.
That's fair. So there's there, there's some good work going on in this nation as far as policy goes, right? So even though we have a system that isn't perfect, but no system is perfect because humans are running it, and we are still figuring things out as we go along. But you think about some of the unnecessary things that people go through. So the cases, let's say probation or parole, there are restrictions on a person's liberty, right? So they can't go outside after 8 o'clock. They can't go outside of a given geographical region, or they can't work the overnight shift. A number of other like anachronistic laws and rules that prevent people from really maximizing their potential in life. So you have organizations like the Reform Alliance. They're trying to change those rules, right? That are kind of arbitrary, that prevent someone from actually maximizing their potential, right? And it isn't just to help the person, right? Well, of course we want to do that, but it's also like fiscally, like a movement in the right direction, because it costs a ton of money to put someone inside of jail, right? When you could have them, being a contributing member, right, to their community, right, providing for their family, right? So things like that are sensible approaches, right, that can come from either side of the political divide. That are just in the best interest of society at large and in the best interest of the individual and their family who is depending on them.
I mean, I agree absolutely. Tell me this: do you agree that a great deal of your humanity and your dignity stems from what you can do for others?
Absolutely. I think when you develop a sense of purpose, right, it is connected to the people that are around you, right? The very core of our existence is connecting with other human beings. And clearly for you to do anything significant in the world, it takes a deep level of collaboration, right? Absolutely. So the fact that I have gone to school, able to start any kind of venture, right, or do any good in the world, it takes people who have set up these systems for me to operate within, right, who provide these supportive structures down to like the roads being built or the cloud, right, the cloud infrastructure, like a number of things you can kind of name. And there's a sense of obligation, right, to not only just give back but contribute, right, to that, right? So
yeah. So my thoughts. I think that I'm a strong believer that there is dignity in work, and I think that our society has overvalued these careers and these jobs that are focused solely on the information and service economy. Mm-hmm. We have gone away from a skills-based economy. We no longer, it's no longer cool to get dirty, and not only is it not cool, people who get dirty get looked down upon. My father got dirty. My father's a drywall contractor. He'd come home covered head to toe in white plastered drywall mud. He got dirty every day of his life for 50 years, and he was my hero, and men like that who go to work and suffer and sacrifice for their families to provide, doing the jobs that people look down on them for, that makes me so mad. Because in my mind, those are the people that make this country work. They're the people building things and doing things. Like everybody else is. There's this concept of rent seeking. Are you familiar with the concept of rent seeking? Yeah. It's important because there are capital allocators in the world who direct, resources to where they're needed. Right. But when you direct resources in a direction and there's nobody at the end of those resources to build, you have a breakdown. And we're seeing it now in society where we have a tremendous lack of skilled labor capable of building, whether it be homes or buildings or, condominiums. I mean, anything, factories. Like, we have an entire generation, maybe even 2 generations of people who do not value that skilled labor, and that's a tragedy. And the reason I touch on this is because we have generations of people sitting in prison, reading or doing nothing.
Right.
And I'm not saying that we should turn these into factories that produce workers but we can give people the opportunity. Another thing I believe very strongly in is that you can't make anybody do anything.
Never.
No. You can incentivize, you can provide opportunity, you can show them, a path, like, hey, we start here, but this is where you end up, after a period of years, where you have mastered a trade, where you've mastered a skill, and it can start in prison because they're not going anywhere. Like, hey, you can show them all the different trades. Like, hey, this is what an electrician does, this is what it looks like when you've mastered your profession. This is what a plumber does. This is what it looks like when you've mastered, and you do that by combining mentorship and resources and education, like, you give people, you have to show them what it looks like at the end. Because if you just say, get this job and, you'll learn this, you become this. And that's not true. You learn this is what it looks like. And then when you're out, there are people who are waiting to hire you.
That's such a profound point. I think, one, you can clearly hear the passion kind of emanating off you when you speak about your father and the work he was doing, and the sense of dignity and pride, right? That was attached to that. I don't know the exact reason, like, why that has been removed, but there is this stigma attached to doing, like, manual labor, or like the work that actually makes the blessings of this country possible, right? And even inside of incarcerated settings, there's also a disconnect between, like, no matter what the person does, there is no act that will be redemptive, right? There is no dignity, there is no value, like, they can provide at all. You bring up an interesting scenario where people do have the time to develop new skills, right? And there is a labor shortage, for sure. But there's an incredible opportunity to teach those trades, right? Whether that's in the area of construction, plumbing, electroengineering, also that still has to happen in society. Like, someone has to do that. And it isn't just like the subclass, right, doing this work. Like, this gets the country, like, running. You will be a contributing, like, member, right, to the growth and health of the nation. I think that's super important. Creating those pathways is another endeavor altogether. And I think that's where the collaboration with legislators and policymakers and people who are involved in government to make sure that pipeline is established in some degree is super meaningful.
So I have this belief that, if you give people, like I said, if you this is what you do, this is how you get there, this is what it looks like at the end. This applies not very specifically to people who are incarcerated, rather, but more generally to everybody in our country. Skills-based training has basically been budgeted out of our schools.
Right.
High school kids, they go to high school and they graduate high school thinking college was my only option. College is not the only option. There are lives to be led with dignity in jobs where you build things that you can point to. My dad, one of his favorite things in the world to do was, whenever I'd go visit him, is drive me around and say, I helped build that house. No, I helped build that house, and I helped build that house. Because you can point to the fruits of your labor and say, I built that. All right, I was a part of that. That is a monolith, a testament to my existence. Not many people outside of like actual builders can do that, right? Like you can build a business and point to it and say, I built that, right? But like you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't take a picture of it. It's a notion, it's an idea. But when you build something tangible, you can touch it.
Right.
And that, that to my father is why he did, in addition to obviously caring for and providing for his family. But, he took great pride in that. And that's such an amazing thing. And so this whole conversation around skills-based training, especially with regards to how do we provide a pipeline out of prison or
right.
to divert people away from prison, it lends itself to something that we've already touched upon in that this labor shortage that exists, right? Like, and that labor shortage, you can almost directly correlate to a significant shortage of affordable housing in this country. Just
right.
not just affordable housing, just housing. Like even if you have money and you want to build a house, you find a contractor. Okay, found a contractor. Sorry, I don't have enough workers.
Right.
I don't have enough people to actually build this house that you want to build. And this and that dynamic lends itself to an entirely different dynamic, in that within our cities we are seeing within our cities, we are experiencing this housing shortage, this affordable housing shortage, homelessness crisis.
Right.
But within these cities, we're experiencing this houselessness crisis, this shortage of affordable housing, and in some instances, just shortage of housing in general, and that is something that we need to address. But because of that, we are experiencing this cyclical gentrification,
right,
where families who have lived within a community for generations are effectively being priced out, and what that looks like is that the owners who own the property, they're the ones cashing out, right? I mean, we had talked about this yesterday before the podcast, and effectively, an area becomes is affordable, or slowly becomes affordable, more affordable relative to the surrounding areas, right? And that attracts the people who don't have as much money, and they go in and they build a community that they love, and using, for instance, Portland as an example, that community all of a sudden becomes very cool.
Portland's very cool, by the way. Just saying.
Portland is pretty cool. But that community becomes cool. And then that attracts other people who are like, hey, that community is cool.
Right.
Like it's got great restaurants, it's got art galleries, they play live music on the streets, they've got street fairs. Like this culture that took decades to build and to develop, now it's cool. Now that attracts, for first moving people who are like, oh, I want to be part of this cool thing that's going on. And then that attracts capital. And capital comes in and says, hey, I could put, a 4-story condominium here,
right,
where your house is. Here's $1 million. Sell me your house. And to someone who's been living there 40 years, who paid, a lot less than $1 million for their house, that's almost an offer they can't refuse.
Right.
And this is the cycle of gentrification, because that neighborhood becomes cool. Maybe a neighborhood somewhere else becomes less cool. Now it becomes affordable. And then people move there again. And now we've got this cycle where cool neighborhood chases cool, capital chases cool neighborhood, creates other opportunities.
Right.
Anyways.
No, that dovetails well with I think my conception of like just community and culture in general, because you have a group of people who exist in a given geographic area who have created a culture that is thriving, right, and a deep sense of community, right, that is supportive to its members, right, and then I think the process of gentrification that you're speaking about is somewhat destabilizing, right, and I think some of the social ills that I think we're experiencing at like a national level is a reflection of that, right? Because the pillars of the community who help keep it together, right? The mom and pop shop, I think, or an active like community member, the church, various other like contributors to that very special place, now being a bit disrupted by other people with interests that may not align with the original ethos of that community, right? And so I couldn't agree more.
So what is the solution?
I have no idea like what I guess what a substantive solution would be for this phenomenon in general. But I do know that finding a way to keep communities intact, right, is important to the youth who are growing up there. I know.
I absolutely agree. My personal belief is that gentrification is inevitable.
Right.
Displacement is not.
Okay. I like that.
That if you are going to, you as a capital allocator,
right.
I'm using economic terms in a podcast, but if you are a person or an organization or a business with money and your desire is to take that money and to build something within a community,
right.
I think it's necessary that whatever you build, you choose to build, has to make room for what you're replacing. You know, so if you're taking a house that used to house somebody who was of a certain economic level,
right.
You have to at least replace what you're taking away. So there's this concept of mixed income, right? Mixed income properties, where if you're a developer and you're like, I want to build a condominium there, well, okay, how many units are you replacing? Are you removing? All right, well, at least that plus one.
Right.
Put it back at a level, at the same level it was before, and then everything else after that is like, okay, we're adding to the community. We're not taking away. And I think at a policy level, it's important to consider that there are a lot of levers that can be like pulled if you have the ability. Everything from zoning to permitting, and then on top of that, tax incentives. There over the last 4.5 years, there have been these economic opportunity zones.
Right.
And economic opportunity zones are, in theory, an amazing thing, right? Like, they've been great if you're very wealthy.
Right.
Like, they're the best thing ever because you can take money, like a capital gain, and you can sell an asset, invest in an opportunity zone, without paying any taxes on it.
Wow.
However, the theory didn't work out quite the way they said it would, right?
Okay.
Like, because what they did was they created these opportunity zones, and they said, oh, there's no accountability in how the money is spent. Like, no, you can invest. They were originally supposed to be invested into communities that needed development, that needed these sorts of mixed income, mixed use properties. They needed investment in these underserved communities.
Right.
But they put it up to the cities and states to say which communities there were. And what that turned into was a situation where the policymakers, the politicians said, well, this is actually like the area. We're going to draw a line around it. And then their developer friends came over and said, well, move that line one street over.
Right.
So they moved the line one street over. Now it includes property they own. So they're building at the edge of the area. And I'm sure over a period of years, some of that development that's occurring at the very edges of these economic opportunity zones will bleed over.
Right.
But it's not that direct investment into directly into the heart of these communities that was needed. I would love to see economic opportunity zones like expanded. I think that they are an amazing opportunity to attract that capital, to help revitalize many of these communities. But you can't just say, hey, we're going to put it on the edge because we don't actually want to be in the middle of it.
Right.
Like being in the middle of that's insane. We'll put it on the edge, and maybe some of those jobs, it'll at least be a shorter commute for some person from within that community. No, we need to ensure that like that money is being directly injected into those places, into the heart of these places that need that investment.
That is profound, Cody. To be honest, and so let me just kind of echo what I'm hearing from you. So these economic opportunity zones would attract business and development, right? Help kind of revitalize the community, the economy, for the people that actually live there.
That was how it was sold.
Right. Okay. But you clearly, one, think that's possible. Two, think that it's a reasonable proposal, right?
Right.
That can be implemented. Incredible. You know that also reminds me of. I remember these developers in, I think it was Mountain View, who were building like one of these condominiums, and I think part of their obligation to the community was to implement, I think it was like solar panels and a garden on the roof, right? And in my mind, I was like, I don't understand why you'd be doing this. But when you mentioned that if you're building in a community and you're taking something away, so clearly there was like a park involved, right? You used to have to at least have this amount of like green space somewhere. And so, yeah, super enlightening, man. It didn't connect it to you just said that.
Well, the problem with that somewhere, like just to jump on the last part of what you said, the somewhere is not good enough. It's
okay.
Like it has to be there,
right?
Like whether they put a park on a roof or they put the building on stilts and put a park on the ground floor. Like if you're going to I mean, this is all notional, right? But if you're going to take a park away and build something there, you better put a park back.
Right.
If you take a 2-unit house away, you better put a 4-unit, like, same income level property back. Like you cannot take something away without giving it something back. And I don't think that's right. I think that, again, that's how you tear apart communities. That's how you displace people who created that community, that culture that exists within a specific neighborhood or geographic area. So yes, like absolutely. Opportunity zones with accountability, I think, is a way that we can increase investment in these underserved areas. And maybe at some point, like communities will become strong enough again and the schools will become strong enough again that the need for diversion programs goes away completely.
Right.
But I think so. If we're using broad strokes here, and this comes down to a discussion that we could that we should have about equality and equity. Like how do we ensure that there's equality within a community, or equity, or both, or do we need to even do that? And what does that even mean? And I think that is. I'll give you my thoughts, but I'd like to hear yours.
Okay, fair. I know. This seems like pretty contentious, just in general, because I believe that the words have been politicized. One, I think clearly everyone is for like equality, right? Like we're all Americans, we're all on the same side, right? We all want a better future for the country, for our families, for our communities. I think prosperity is number one on anyone's list. Right? We realize we only have a limited time here, and that we want to contribute and make the situation better for the next generation. So equality isn't a like troublesome word. I think what equity comes into the equation, it seems to be placed in the zero-sum framework, right? So equity is if you need more than another person, then if I'm giving you more, that means I'm taking away from someone, and that someone like could like theoretically be me, and in some cases like it could be me. I think if it isn't so adversarial, right? If you are looking at this like we are a team, right? And you just need more reps, right? Right? You just need more practice, or like we need to bring in like a different like coach for you, or a different like training specialist to get you up to speed so you can fulfill, right, either your responsibility, your obligation, or you can maximize your own potential. Because the stronger every member is, like the stronger we are as a team. I don't know what that looks like in practice, right? Because there are a number of different areas where there's opportunities are not readily available to everybody on the same scale. I'm sure that has historical reasons why, but I think an approach that provides the maximum amount of opportunities to everyone who actually wants to pursue them, right, is for sure a winning strategy. But let's definitely hear your thoughts, Cody, because you have something more concrete in mind. I see it in your eyes, man.
No, it isn't more concrete,
Yeah.
Like I absolutely believe in equality, right? Like equality of opportunity, The reality is that not everybody has that equality and opportunity. There are clear disparities,
Right.
that exist in our society of that equality and opportunity. And you and your experiences are a very clear example of that to me. Equity, I think, is a problematic word. I think it's one of those things that people hear and they're like, what is equity in addition to equality?
Mm-hmm.
What does that even mean? Like you said, is it a zero-sum game? Is it a problem that even needs to be solved? Right? Like if we give everybody the same opportunities from the earliest points of their life, early childhood education, good schools, a curriculum that adjusts to the level of the student, and then we get to the end of that process where everybody was treated equally, and that person still needs help, additional help. Is that really fair to everybody else? Maybe, because it comes down to that. Is it that person's decisions that got them to the point where they're at the end of the process of that, what is it, education, that educational process that we as a society have agreed to provide to everybody with equal footing, and they get to the end and it's like, okay, well, this person is still much further behind than everybody else, but they want to still be a doctor, or they want to be a lawyer. Like, is that reasonable? That because I think maybe there are mismatched expectations.
Yeah.
Where like, hey, I did everything I was supposed to do, and yet I still can't get accepted to medical school. That's the reality. Like there is a imbalance, in talent and ability, and it's whether it be genetic, or whether it be via nurture. It's a nature versus nurture argument. So if we can work towards a society where the nurture element is equal, I think that equity component is unnecessary.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I actually agree with it. I think there's a bit of like this artificial like construct around like human development, like potential, right? I think we funnel people into like the same system, right? You go to school, I don't know, for 17 years or something like that, and at the end, then you go to college, and then you go to college again, and then you're supposed to become like a doctor or a lawyer or some other like highly touted like profession. Well, like I think the reality is that people have different like trajectories and different paths, right? If we actually figure out what someone is like actually good at, like what their passions are, what they have like an inherent ability, right? And you were speaking about curriculum that actually nourishes this or enriches this, right? I think you would be able to maximize that person's potential in a much more meaningful way than trying to funnel them into the same track. And maybe it takes that person longer, right? But that's their life, right? So it took me 28 years or 27 years to get an undergraduate degree, but that's my journey though. Like I like they're like younger students and they got theirs in their time, but that's their life though, right? I think there has to be a resetting of expectations that are individualized, right? And people don't stop learning and achieving things after a certain point, right? I think it's when people give up, like, oh, I haven't achieved this thing, I haven't done this thing, my life is meaningless. Like that isn't true. There's this artificial race that no one's actually in. Like, you're in your own race. It's your own personal growth. How do you access the resources to maximize that, right? Instead of looking at the next person and being resentful or envious because of something that they have that's particular to them, you'll have your own journey. So go for it, though, Cody.
Well, again, going back to this concept of equity, I think the thing that is problematic in most people's minds is that you get to the end and you're not where you want to be,
right?
And you're like, I want more. Where you were given the same opportunities as everybody else. Now, if you're in a situation where you get to the end and you were not given the same opportunities, I think there's an argument for equity, but within the context of, like, let's give you the help, let's fill those gaps that where we failed you in the past. I think that is the proper application. I don't even like calling it equity. Like, it's not, it's not. It's just continuing to serve the individual and provide them with what they need. And as long as everybody continues to, like, make progress in good faith, I think that's important. I think that's how we push and pull people forward. It's the pulling part that becomes problematic, right? Like, it's, you can push a little bit, but when you have to drag someone along, that's the part where, like, I'm like, I don't know if we should be doing that. Like, that person needs to want to go where they want to, where they think they're going, or where they want to go. Like, if they're just, like, they're getting completely pushed or dragged, that they're going to get to the end and be like, why am I here? And I've met many people like that in my life. I've met doctors who are like, it was just what I was told to do.
Right.
I hate this, but I'm here, and I've spent the majority of my life educating myself, training myself to get here, and that's a real problem. But I think one of the underlying threads to this entire conversation is that there are perspectives that span a spectrum of belief,
right?
In this conversation, and, like, we have issues like homelessness and houselessness and prison reform, and we have political systems or political ideologies, dogmas that have, completely different, like, plans or thoughts on whether is it a problem or is it a problem that we need to solve. Some may even say it's not even a problem, and some might say it's a problem that we shouldn't have to solve. But I think there's arguments to be made from the mindset, regardless of where you exist on a political spectrum, for reasons why to solve various problems that we have within our society. And so my question, I'll ask you this question.
Sure.
I'm trying to give you the opportunity
That's fair.
to put your thoughts out there, and then I'll give you mine. So, how do we bridge these people, these philosophies and these thought processes and these dogmas that exist on a spectrum? I would almost call that spectrum a circle.
Right.
Because, like, you may have opposite sides of a circle, but you move a little bit in one direction, you move a little bit in the other, and, like, you can eventually. The thing is it's not a line. I think you can move along the circle and meet someone somewhere along that circle where you can find common ground to have a conversation.
I really like that graphic or like visual representation of the circle, because I think when people think politics, it's usually on opposing ends of some, like, arbitrary, like, line, right? And in reality, people are more common than they think, right? Than they would give themselves credit for. Most of us we all, like, exist in the same generation. We all have, like, predominantly, like, the same influences. We're part of, like, the same culture, like, largely, right? I mean, you have particular cultures that exist within like the broader like American culture, but our experiences are relatively the same, right? We're living in the same reality, and even though a particular issue may be sensationalized, right, to generate some kind of anger or fear or foment tension, like that is one issue. Humans are much more complex than one or two or three issues, right? You can strike up a conversation with anyone, and you're going to find something that you have in common, right? And maybe that those are mundane things like, oh, do you like steak or lamb chops, or are you like vegan, or do you like basketball? And those seem like common things that, well, they don't seem as important as these kind of large like political or social issues that we're grappling with to make our society better. But I think there are a number of touch points that people will agree on. So like a stronger economy, like people like agree on that. Like you want a stronger economy, you want safer neighborhoods, like you want that, you want cleaner neighborhoods, right? You want technology that has like an impact on society in a positive way. Like everybody wants that. Accountability with our leaders, everybody wants that. So it's just baffling to me how the political arena is able to separate people, right? It is the strangest phenomenon when like actually we all want the same thing, right? We're just distracted by these arguments that put us into artificial camps, right? And tell you how to behave and what to be angry about and what to not like about the other person, when in fact, if you two were in the same room, you'd probably like each other.
I absolutely agree. And, going back to my analogy of a circle,
right.
Like if political ideologies existed on a circle, that allows for the nuance of a position, right? Because if it's on a line, there's really no nuance, right? You're on one side or the other. There's no common ground. Like you can't get to the middle without completely compromising your values. Right. I think most people aren't at these extremes. Most people are somewhere along that arc between the extremes. And that's where we can find common ground. That's where we can find common ground with many issues.
Can I say something about that as well, like meeting in the middle and compromise? Maybe compromise isn't the correct term, but when you have a family, it's never like this one overlord over the entire family. You have different members of the family who contribute in their own unique way, but are important and vital to like the health and the continuation of that family. Like dinner, right? It's like people contribute to that. Like someone has to get the food, maybe someone works, maybe someone cooks it, right? There's all these different elements, right? That contribute to a family like running, right? Being operational. And I'm almost certain that you don't agree on every single thing, right? And yet you have to maintain like a household that is productive and things aren't being destroyed and people can count on like waking up and like mom helping me with like my homework and dad like helping me like get to practice, right? Just counting on these things, despite if there are some kind of like disagreements, it will not destroy, right, the family. And I think about like America, like we're a political family, right? I may not agree with every single thing that you believe in because I am not you and I have my own experiences. There's never going to come a time where I'm going to intentionally sabotage everything that I know to prove like a point, right? Like that's never going to happen, right? So
I mean, Jodi, you and I absolutely view this country the same way. We are a family with most of us have a deep love for this country, and what that means to every person varies, differently. To me, I valued, my this country, and I put myself into harm's way deliberately when I enlisted in the Army, and I was ready through my service to die for this country and in the pursuit of its political and military goals. And many of my friends have died in service to this country. Many more of my friends have died as a result of that service outside of the military through the abuse of drugs and alcohol. through directly through suicide, intentional suicide, and you know, the funny thing about the United States that I always try to think about is we're still the underdog in the world.
Yeah.
You know that? Like, we are a military power, we're an economic power. Everybody wants us to fail, right? Like, everybody wants us to fail. They want to take us down a peg. Like, they don't want us to like become unstable and like blow the world up, because that's the worst case scenario, right? But like, everybody looks at us with a sense of jealousy and awe, and there's the German word. Every time we have our foibles, there's this German word Schadenfreude, right? They get a little bit giddy. They're like, ha 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 ha. But like you and I, we've had those sorts of our own sorts of failures, and that we have fallen into. And I'd love for you to talk about a time where maybe someone was happy that you failed, or was waiting for you to fail, where you were the underdog, where you were that prototypical American that was like, someone was waiting for you to fail, and that you had to kind of climb out.
Well said. I guess just to begin, I couldn't think of a better situation to be in. Like, I think there is this like glorified like perspective on like being the underdog, because you have something to prove, right? You are up against like a formidable foe who is doubting you, right? You have to dig deep within yourself, right, to actually overcome this, right? Which is just a story that is not only inspiring and motivating, but probably like resonates the most with like Americans in general. Like, that's part of the ethos of like the founding of this nation, is that, right? So the mythology of like America is along similar lines. But on like a personal level, I think you look for those moments, right? And then when it does present itself, it isn't discouraging. Like, oh, here is this person that doesn't believe in me. It's like, oh, this is now my moment to rise to the occasion. So case in point, I remember when I was getting released from Auburn Correctional Facility. So I was 25 and a half years old. It was like the day before Obama's birthday or something like that, and 2017. And I'm getting out, and I remember talking to my former professor, like, okay, I'm ready to come to Cornell and make it happen. And they're like, oh, well, there's enrollment is like in a few weeks, and like we thought it would be a better idea for you to enroll in like the local community college. It was a TC3, and nothing wrong with that, right, at all. But in my mind, it became very clear that there was like some doubt of my own intelligence, even though prior to that point I had been studying with like his colleagues, right, because they're all like Cornell professors for over 4 years, right, had aced everything. Like, I was like the valedictorian. Maybe that was fake, I guess. So there was some doubt on my own intelligence, right? And it was the first time that dawned on me, right? Because these people that I trusted, and I believed in their belief in me, and that was a moment of reckoning too. Like, oh, okay, so now I have to not only prove to like you, right, but then to myself that I can actually do this again. Well said. So I remember they had sent me to live in like my old community, right? So they sent me back to the slums. This is the Department of Corrections, right? This is their strategy for reentry. They send you back to the area that you committed.
To be surrounded by all the same people.
Right, all the same people. And not only that, like the victims of the crime that you haven't like made things right with, right? Because there's no process to actually make amends, right? To make that situation whole again. So they send you right back there around all your co-defendants, the community that you helped to destroy. You haven't done anything to support in years. Right, so I went to one of the homeless shelters there, and I remember just pleading my case of like parole. Like, I have a situation in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell. I had housing. I have a job set up. Thankfully, I think I was doing janitorial work, so it was the first job I had had in my entire adult life. So I was happy for that. Parole wasn't too impressed, but then another professor ended up helping me out. I was like, we'll get you down here, because he believed. Like, he actually believed I was smart. And all you need is one person to believe, right? And then you believe in their belief and start believing in yourself, and then really go for the gusto. So I remember getting to Cornell finally and seeing the same professor who was like, oh, you should enroll in the community college. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, not only am I going to attend Cornell, but I'm going to transfer out of this school and I'm going to go to Stanford. And that professor looked at it with the most incredulous look ever. Like, you're out of your mind. And it's like, well, what's your safety school? I'm like, oh, this is my safety school. And just could not believe like that I was actually going to, do it, because you have to take standardized tests. And this is the thing about like equality and like equity, right? I just need a fair shot, right? It's like, give me the test that you give to everybody else, right? Because at Cornell, you didn't have to take a test. You could just get in, right? I think they waived the test. But then in the back of everyone's mind, there's like, oh, are you actually intelligent, right? Just to be completely honest, right? It's not the right way to help someone like uplift themselves and motivate an entire community that resonates with that story or that path, right? There is a way out, right? It's like you can work hard, you can study, and like the world will open up to you. Like, I fundamentally believe that, right? I don't think there's a scenario where someone has worked hard, provided value,
had the ability,
and like nothing happened for them. Like, I see no evidence of that, and I firmly believe that. And so I remember asking, like, for this test, I just need the books. Maybe I need some help paying for the test, but I'll just work some overtime. Like, can I get some extra hours, right? And that allowed me to pay for the test and the books, and I needed some like additional training, get some tutors. I'll ask my professor, would you mind like helping me out? They helped out. I ended up scoring like the 99th percentile, transferred in, and got to Stanford, and told that professor like it's not only just the intelligence, it's like the grit, and I thank you for doing that, because that is the story of this nation. That is a story of all the greats. Like, that motivates entire generations to continue to achieve more than what they were expected to do.
Well, you're like, we started this discussion with, allusions to the power of your story, like, and the exemplar that you are to people who were in the same position as you. Right. Like, you are that person that all of these kids and these people who maybe have not had the opportunities in life that everyone else has had, but like, they can look to you and they can say, you know what, Jodi did it. I can rise. And I mean, I'm literally getting tingles right now. Yeah. Like, I'm not, it's because you're inspiring to me too. My underdog story isn't quite yours. But I've had to overcome my own share of just not having the most perfect or easy life. I grew up very poor in Hawaii. It's one of those places where you can become a teenager before you realize that you are poor because you're living in paradise. My father worked hard. My mother kept a shop, but we never had extra. We sometimes didn't have enough. When I was 11, my mom decided that she couldn't handle a preteen boy, that it was not within, her ability. So she sent me to live with my father in California. And that's where I realized that, we were poor. My bedroom that I shared with my brother was a camper trailer that, went in the back of a truck, but it was just on jack stands. And I don't think anyone ever, like, in that part of my life, the only person who believed in me, I think, were my mom and dad. One of the things that my dad did for me, because he recognized because he supported me, everywhere he went, if he found a book, he would buy it for me. We lived out in the middle of nowhere on hundreds of acres of land that were owned by a friend of a friend of a friend, and they didn't care if we put our trailers there, and we lived there. But that's where we lived, and so my dad would bring me books, and we didn't even have. I mean, we were so far out in the middle of nowhere. Like, if the stars aligned, we might get a football game occasionally on a Sunday. But we would watch it through lines and static on a black and white television. No, I mean, you have to understand where I came from as a child. I had books, and I had my brother, and that's my foundation, right? Where our stories are maybe a little different is that I had my father, who was this paragon of hard work. Maybe not ambition, but the man, he worked hard. He got up at 5 a.m. every day. He went to work. He provided for his family. He didn't take anything from anyone. It was a point of pride to him that even when he would go months without work because of the economy was bad, he would borrow the money rather than take the food stamps. This is something that he believed very strongly in, so sometimes there wasn't that much food then, but I looking back on it, I wish he would have taken the help. Maybe he would have had an opportunity to get ahead. These programs exist specifically for these sorts of situations, and for people like him. So in a way, I'm an underdog too, in that nobody really expected anything of me. Hey, your dad's a contractor. You're poor. I didn't have nice clothes. We shopped at Walmart. I wore sweatpants to school because they were the cheapest pants you could buy. I didn't. If I fell down and tore them, I didn't get new ones. I learned how to sew, and I sewed them up. My dad would buy me shoes 2 sizes too big so that I could grow into them. These are the kind of things that families that are struggling, they do. They adapt. They accommodate. For the resources that they have. But my dad realized that I had more potential than he did, and he did everything he could to feed that. And like I said, he would go to, if he was always driving. He was going everywhere, and if he saw a roadside stand that was selling books, he'd stop and buy them all. I don't know if maybe people remember, but it used to be people would have a box of books, and they'd be 10 cents a book. My dad would buy them all. Right. So I have read thousands of books because that's all I had growing up. And it shaped me. I have stories in my head. I have knowledge in my head. I've lived and experienced through those stories, and one of the, literature, it's very romanticized, right? And it's some of these stories made military and war almost seem romantic, and hey, that's what I'm gonna do, but more than that, it made. It also gave me that escape from my current situation. And from those experiences, I went on to high school, and I wasn't the best student, I lived a long ways from school. For me to get to school was a 30-40 minute bus ride every day. And on top of that, my father had, and my stepmother they had decided that living with me and my brother was too much, so they moved away. And at the age of 13, it was me and my brother living in a trailer on a piece of property in the middle of nowhere. My father would he would come and he would bring food. He'd make sure we had money, but his presence was missing, and it was just it was me and my brother. I don't know if we've touched on this, but my brother's developmentally disabled, and so it was I was an adult. At 13, I was caring for him. He was my brother is, he's the, my brother is effectively a 12-year-old boy, for all the good and bad of that. And I love him more than anything. He's my brother. He's my brother. But he needs help always. And, so I'm always aware of, like, I've been taking care of him, for a very long time. So high school comes, right? Like, and I'm taking the bus to high school, and I'm helping him, like, dragging him through school, cajoling his teacher's assistants into giving him passing grades. I'm not asking you to give him an A, but, like, don't fail him. And we get through high school, and, like, now I don't have school in my life. I don't have a mission. And not having a mission for me is not, I need a mission. Like, I need a purpose. Right. My sister, she moved to Oregon from Hawaii, and my sister was a young mother. She had my nephew at 17. She moved to Oregon. She's like, I need help. I can't do this by myself. And I said, okay, I have a mission. So I moved to Oregon, and I helped my sister, like, with, get established in Oregon, to get into a routine, to get housing, like, and, we shared resources, and I filled in where I could with my nephew. But it eventually became very apparent that it wasn't enough. Right. I needed a bigger mission. And I was watching television, and one of those Be All You Can Be commercials came on. And it was a man rising out of swamp water. And I was like, that's a mission. That's what I want to do. And I decided that I was gonna, I'm gonna join the Army, and I'm gonna do that. So I went into the recruiter, and I said, I want to do that. What is that? He's like, that's the infantry. Is that you sure you want to do that? And I said, yes, I want to do that, because, like, I have this streak running through me that says I don't like to do things the easy way. Let me do them the hardest way possible, actually, because if it's too easy, it's not fun. Yeah. And this plays later into my political ambitions, but I was like, I want to be infantry. Put me in the infantry. And he's like, okay. 2 weeks later, I was literally, from the time I took the entry testing and completed the physical portion of being in the Army, I was in basic training, getting yelled at.
Wow.
And, I was, so that, I ended up enlisted in the infantry at 19. And I had a mission. I had a purpose. I had structure. I had all the discipline I needed. I thrived. And it became apparent to me and everybody around me that, this was the place for me. Like, I was meant to be a soldier. And my chain of command was, they came to me and they said, it's clear that, you're a great soldier. We think it's a good idea that you might consider becoming an officer in the Army. And I said, okay. How do I do that? And they said, well, you have multiple programs. There's, the Green to Gold program. You could stay in and take classes, get a degree while you're in, and then do, like, an officer candidate school potentially, or you could go to West Point. And I said, which one of those is harder? And they said, oh, definitely West Point.
For sure, West Point.
They said, definitely West Point. And I said, I want to go to West Point. And so I applied. I got accepted to the Preparatory Academy, the United States Military Academy Preparatory Academy, which is, which is where they send almost all the soldiers coming out of the Army. They go there because most of us had been out of high school for a while, When was the last time I did algebra? Right. A few years ago. When's the last time I wrote an essay? A few years ago. So they get you back into that setting where you just, you either refresh or refine the skills necessary to graduate. So I went to the prep school. I graduated from prep school. I was admitted to West Point. I got accepted to I went to West Point. I graduated from West Point. I was commissioned as an air defense officer in the Army, and I was at officer training in Texas, and I managed to hurt myself in such a way that my continued service just wasn't really an option. And I got out, but like no one ever expected me from where I was, where I started, to end up where I was even when I got out of the Army. You get out of the Army, and it becomes a matter of like, what's my mission? I have no mission anymore. And my best friend from high school was like, I'm starting this business. Let's do it together. And I said, okay, let's do it. So now I had a mission.
Right.
But that mission was to make money.
Right.
I'd never had a mission like that before. Like, there was no making money as a mission is not it's a soulless mission.
Right. But you needed a mission.
But I needed a mission. I did need a mission. And making money, it turns out I'm just as good at that as I am at being a soldier, So I did that. And then I got burned out. I was working 100 hours a week, and I didn't value what I was doing outside of the money that I was earning. And I didn't want to do it anymore. So I sold out my position. And then I just started to travel the world, and I started to experience and see things and live. And I realized again that I needed a mission. And I started looking for missions. And I came back here to Oregon, and I enrolled at a university, Portland State University. And I just started taking random classes, like, what interests me? What am I passionate about? What do I want to do with my life? Now that I'm in this position. And in the course of one of the classes, constitutional law course, I met this woman, and so we were in the same class, and we would ask to be the way the class was structured is like they give you a Supreme Court case, and you'd read it, and you'd go home and prepare a brief, and the next day the teacher would call on people to brief the class on that mission, to brief the class on that brief that you prepared. And she, after class one day, she just came up to me and says, like, the way that you think is remarkable. I want you to run for office. Like,
I did not know it was going. That was good. Nice.
And her name was Barbara Ellis, and she's very involved in local politics in Portland, and has been for a very long time. And she's a wonderful woman. But it had been the first time I'd ever considered that as a mission, right? And she was very heavily involved with the Oregon Progressive Party, which is a third party here in Oregon, and a lot of the values the things that they value, I value. So I didn't have a problem, but my values don't align perfectly with the Progressive Party of Oregon. But they align enough, right? Like, I believe in so many of the things that they believe in. And I said, okay, I will be a candidate. And it so happened that there was a special election in 2012 to replace a candidate, a congressman who had resigned. So I said, I will be this candidate for this position. So I put my name in, and I started to just walk around and talk to people and tell them about myself and ask them what's important to them. And I realized that this is a real mission. This is something that I believe in, that that there are people who are hurting, whose voices are not heard, who don't have the ability or the resources to make themselves heard. So I said, okay, I can do this. This is what I'm going to do. I didn't win that election. I lost badly, and what I realized in that election, there are a lot of things I realized. One, people kind of think you're insane for trying to run as a third-party candidate, right? But, like, I love to do things the hard way.
Right. It's a recurring theme.
It's a recurring theme in my life.
Right.
What is the hardest way to do it? I think I'll run as a third-party candidate. That's the hardest way to do it. But the other thing I realized is that all of the third parties here in Oregon are facing the same problem. So I decided that, there was if you take, for instance, the Oregon Progressive Party and the Pacific Green Party of Oregon and even the Libertarian Party of Oregon, and you were to lay out their core values, like the things that they believe, there is significant overlap. There are clear differences, but if we go back to this circle, right, that political beliefs exist upon, in my mind, there's enough overlap for me to believe that I can represent them well enough. Moreover, I'm willing to listen to them and talk to them and like understand their perspectives, and I communicated that to them, and so I became the very first candidate in United States history to be nominated by the Pacific Green, by the Green Party, by the Libertarian Party, by the Progressive Party. Nobody else has even tried.
Yeah, it doesn't even sound real, man. That's incredible, bro.
And I lost again. The other underlying theme here is that I realized is that third-party candidates are almost always severely underfunded.
Right.
In addition to be considered irrelevant to mainstream politics, in the minds of the media and in the minds of voters, to be honest, like the average voter, you're irrelevant because you don't have any money, because you don't have any backing. So I set out to earn money, and I have worked very hard over the past 10 years to create the wealth necessary to run for and win political office so that I can represent the people of Oregon in the way that I want to. And I think that that's important. But like, I'm an underdog. I know I'm an underdog, right? Like, I don't have any legislative experience, but I don't consider that a liability, like, right. I personally, like, my gut tells me that those people who have that legislative experience, they come with baggage, with compromise. They've made compromises somewhere, right? Like, I like to do things the hard way, but like, my values are uncompromised, and I will take that with me to Washington when I win. Anyways, sorry, I'm like over here like tearing up a little bit.
That was incredible, man.
So, it's not something we had addressed specifically, but Jodi, I value and respect you as a friend. Like, when we met, I was like, this man has a story. Like, I have a story, and like, I think our stories, we're coming from different places, but we're on the same arc, man. And you are. I asked you to join my campaign, and I'm so excited to have you like on board as my policy director, and like the way you think and the way that you believe is it's so important to me, and I'm honored to have you on my team. And I wanted to thank you for agreeing to help me and to be that person in my campaign that I can talk about positions with and get a perspective that I don't have. So thank you again.
No, you got it, Cody. I think what really speaks volumes about the work you're doing and the campaign that you're spearheading is you are addressing like the sentiments of the nation at large. I know it's Oregon, and people may not be familiar with what's going on here, but it is understanding that there are more unifying elements that exists amongst us than people realize. And it's going to take an unlikely candidate. It's going to take someone who's actually like from like that swath of society, right? Who normally doesn't get a say, who normally doesn't get a shot, who always has to do it the hard way, but often don't see light at the end of the tunnel, right? And I feel like your journey is going to resonate with people. They're going to see a piece of their own story inside what you're doing. Whether that's doing like politics, not the usual way, or not doing politics at all. It's just like, what is the will of the people, right? How do I make sure that we're all represented? How do I speak to the concerns of, my community? And I think that is just huge. So you're in the midst of a historical moment, man. So I'm super honored to even be a part of it, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy academic schedule to be here, and I look forward to a future that we can build together.
So for it, same here, man.